How do you become the best? Growing up, I wanted to be the best. I wanted to be the best runner, the best student, the best soccer player, the best friend. It was hard to do because being the best, the way I thought about it, required beating everybody else. It's only been over the last several years that my thinking on how to be the best has changed. And I think today I have a reasonable claim to being the best LinkedIn ghostwriter for lawyers on the planet. But I didn't get there by beating anybody else. I became the best by changing how I thought about what it means to be the best. That it's not about beating other people or being the top of the hierarchy. It's about finding what I'm interested in, what I care about, who I know, and putting those pieces together in a way that I became kind of the one for that thing. So it's less about hierarchy, more about territory. I'm sharing this episode of my podcast in the digital arena with you, where I talk about how I think about becoming the best in this very specific way, and include some of my favorite influences on the topic. So I hope you enjoy the episode. Welcome back to the digital arena with me, Tony Albrecht. I'm going to keep this episode tight. I want to talk about differentiation. I've been on a Savannah Bananas kick recently. You know these guys? Minor league baseball team out of Savannah, Georgia, owned by a guy named Jesse Cole. You may have seen him on TikTok or Insta in a yellow tux. So goofy. I'm absolutely loving it. I've gone down the rabbit hole on these. I've been watching more of their stuff on social, then started watching videos of Jesse talking about building the team and the business. Heard him on the Acquired podcast last week, just telling the story of how they went from being just a totally broke, like low minor league team to being the most entertaining show, certainly in baseball, possibly in sports right now. And I'm blowing through his book Fans First right now. And it's such a beautiful study in differentiation where this is something I've been spending a lot of time thinking about over the last few years. And I'm thinking about right now with Contender and where we're at as a business, where we have a fairly distinct niche as we've been the LinkedIn ghostwriting agency for lawyers in the U.S. for almost 3 years now. And in that, I've seen and been sold on the power of differentiating yourself from the market. And that when it comes to, this is true for content, I think this is also true for trying to build and grow a business. One of the hardest things to do is to stand out from the crowd, to cut through the noise, to just even get on somebody's radar that they are interested in knowing more about whatever it is you do. And when we start businesses, and I've made this mistake on more than one occasion, there's the impulse to think you need to go broad to appeal to more people. And I think that intuition is understandable, and I think it also doesn't serve most of us particularly well. Thinking that we need to cast the widest net we can so that we might be able to get enough people. Whereas the alternative is to get really specific about who you help and the problem you help them solve, and then go find those people. So instead of just being that fisher person who's casting that net, hoping you get a few fish, be that hunter where you know who you're talking to. You're very clear. Could be a broad group of people, could be a very big group of people, but know who you're talking to, who you're trying to connect with. Go find those people. That's certainly been my approach, where at this point my ICP is very specific. I'd say it applies to maybe about 0.5% of lawyers in the United States, and that's served us really well. But when we talk about differentiating on content or as a brand, Marty Neumeier, the godfathers of branding, talks about the power of radical differentiation. When everybody's zigging, you want to be zagging. And Jesse Cole's first book speaks to that point. The title of Find Your Yellow Tux, I think it is. Seth Godin had a great book, Purple Cow. Same idea, right? That in a world of sameness and marketing sameness, you want to be that purple cow. That is remarkable just by virtue of how different it is. I think Jesse probably read Purple Cow when he was thinking about Yellow Tux. Are they even the same? Yeah, they're even the same number of letters in Yellow Cow and little Yellow Tux and Purple Cow. How about that? Another example that comes to mind is Mike Morse, a lawyer out of Detroit, who I've had the chance to get to know and work with a little bit over the last year or so. He has built a very successful law firm, a 9-figure firm out of Detroit, and he's also written a best-selling book called Fireproof. It kind of lays out the firms, and Mike and his COO, John Knockhazel, wrote the book together, lays out sort of their recipe for growth and success. And Mike's big thing in this respect, he talks about finding your Cherry Garcia. His way he articulates it is in a world of vanilla advertising and legal marketing. So much of it is, I go back, think about daytime TV when I was growing up, and in St. Louis we had firm Brown and Crouppen, and everybody knew, Brown and Crouppen, and the kids ran around. Why would I bring up that if you're having trouble pooping, call Brown and Crouppen? Why would I bring that up on a podcast? Literally 30 years later, why would I do that? The mind is an amazing mystery. We're not going to solve that in today's podcast. But I could still remember the commercials of Terry Crouppen in his suit saying, we'll fight for you. And that's what just about every lawyer advertisement was at that time. Whereas Terry Crouppen is actually a pretty colorful guy. In his later years, he has taken to just like tooling around in tie-dye and like looking almost like he's from the Grateful Dead. It seems like he is an interesting dude. He's not that buttoned up guy I remember from the commercials when I was a kid. And this is what Mike sort of zeroed in on, where for many years, more than a decade after he started his firm, he did not do any advertising. And then he started doing advertising at a point where the firm had to, and he had a hard time making stuff that was interesting. And pretty quickly, he said, we're not going to do that. Let's make stuff that's interesting to look at, that we like, that shows some personality. Don't be vanilla. And his favorite Ben & Jerry's, or favorite ice cream flavors, Cherry Garcia. He found a lot of success in trying to do that, like being different. And for him, that looked like funny TV spots, funny billboards, having his mom in commercials, his mom Sue. So let's think about this with Cherry Garcia, Purple Cow, Yellow Tux. When I work with clients, I talk about your corner of the internet, that a way that we think about differentiating, or at least positioning ourselves in the market in a way that we know where we stand and we know who we're talking to, with the hope that message can come across more clearly. I'm now thinking more about, okay, so it's important to plant your flag and as clearly as you can communicate where you stand and why. But then there's also this element of how do you stand out and how do you cut through the noise from your corner. And that's a harder proposition, and one that I'm just starting to think more about. Okay, what does that look like for me? Do I need an orange tux? Maybe an orange cow suit? Or do you actually need that sort of thing to stand out, like a yellow tux? Do you need a prop? I don't know. I don't know that you do. They could certainly help. I'll say that I try to encourage my clients, and this is something I think about for myself, is thinking about details that you can include in your stuff, in your content you're putting out, that can be kind of your thing. Like for me, distance running in the woods is one of those things where I'll use photos from runs. I'll refer to those with some consistency. I use a winky face emoji, and I use winky faces pretty liberally. I try to be a little tongue-in-cheek with how I put things out, not take myself too seriously. But I think there's more that I can do. Even though am I a one of one? I'm not a one of one, I don't think. But I'm fairly close at this point. And that's not I'm a special snowflake sort of thing. That's a product of, I think, a couple things. One is the positioning, what I'm saying about who do you help and how. Getting so specific on those two things that I'm kind of the only person who does that thing for that group of people in the way that I do it. I'm basically the only one. And then also just the level of personality that I'll show, around my life, how I think, what I'm interested in. I'm going to keep thinking about this yellow tux thing and like how to stand out. It's also something I'm starting to think about more for clients, but I'm interested in your thoughts. If you want to ping me on LinkedIn, if you've got ideas on how do we best differentiate on LinkedIn in the market, how do we avoid being vanilla? How do we avoid being boring? How do we avoid just failing to cut through the noise because what we're doing is not particularly interesting? So that's not fun. We don't want to do that, do we? And if I would highly recommend, I'm going to drop the link to the podcast episode that Jesse Cole did with the Acquired guys, Ben and David. It's an excellent episode, whether you're into entrepreneurship or baseball or both, as my man Adam Norris. It is such a good story of going from literally being broke to they're now starting to build their own game, Banana Ball, like a faster, funnier version of baseball, where if a fan catches a foul ball, the batter is out. And there's just all sorts of craziness. Yeah, there's dancing and guys hitting on stilts and all sorts of crazy stuff. So enough out of me. Good to see you in here, and I will see you out there in the digital arena.